Alright, so let's get started. So we're going to be going over how to set up a Django project from scratch, and then I'll detail a basic workflow that we'll be implementing as we create an app together. So this is geared towards beginners, but I've been developing in Django for a long time, and I still use this, so it's just a great resource for established programmers as well. And you can follow along at realdjango.herokuapp.com. So as far as requirements are concerned, you should have some Python experience and know basic terminal or PowerShell commands. And if you've never used a command line before, you can take a look at the following commands here and just go over the basic commands. So again, this tutorial is at realdjango.herokuapp.com. I'm not going to go over every single part of it, so it's best that you follow along as I'm going through this. So let's look at what you need for a basic development environment. You need Python, of course, and we're going to be using the latest version, which is 2.75. I actually have 2.74 on my computer here, but as long as you have a 2.7x version, you'll be fine. You also need easy install and pip, and we'll go over each one of these here in a minute. You'll need Git, virtualenv, Django, of course. We're going to set up a database. You'll need South, which is for database migrations, and then you'll also need a text editor. I'm going to be using Sublime 2. Komodo Edit is really good, and if you're just starting out, Gedit is also a really good one. It is free, and there's versions for both Unix, so Linux and Mac, as well as Windows. So I'm running this tutorial from a Unix environment, Mac OS X, and that comes pre-installed with Python. So if you want to check your Python version, you can open up the terminal and just type in Python -v, and then you can see that I have Python 2.74. Now, if you're on a Windows machine, you're going to have to download Python from scratch, which you can do from the official Python website. And then I have instructions here on how to install Python. So next you want to go ahead and install Easy Install and pip. And to install Easy Install, you'll have to download Setup Tools, and I'll go over that in just a minute. So both Easy Install and pip are Python package managers, and they just make it a lot easier to download, install, and upgrade Python packages. And so to download Easy Install, again, you'll need Setup Tools, and you can just go to this link here. The latest version is 0.7.4. And if you're on a Windows machine, there are instructions here on how to install it. And then if you're on a Unix-based system, there are instructions here. So it's really easy to install and set up. And if you do need help, I do have another video here. So after you install Setup Tools, then we want to go ahead and install pip. And pip depends on Easy Install. It's basically a wrapper around Easy Install, so it uses Easy Install to run, but it's just a lot more powerful than Easy Install. So after you install Easy Install, then you want to install pip. So you can do that from the command line, and you can just type in Easy Install pip. And again, if you need help, I do have this video here which goes over both Setup Tools and pip. So next, you want a version control system. And let me just open up this link here, and we can talk a little bit about version control. So version control just basically records all the changes that you make to a repository, and a repository is just a set of files. And basically it just makes it easy to take a look at all the changes that you've made to that specific set of files over time. You can also revert files back to a previous state in case you made a mistake, like you deleted an entire section of code that you shouldn't have. So basically, just with a version control system, if you screw things up, you can really easily recover from those mistakes. And believe me, it'll save a huge headache in the long run. So we want to use Git version 1.7 or 1.8, and you can install those from this link here. And you want to grab the download link that is appropriate for your operating system. And this is really easy to install, so I'm not going to go over the installation. Alright, so next we want to get a database installed. And so SQLite comes pre-installed with Python. So we're going to actually look at MySQL. And you want to first download MySQL from here. And again, you want to grab the version that's appropriate for your operating system. And there's pretty detailed instructions here on how to install MySQL. Just make sure you grab the latest version here. And after you're done installing that, then we want to go ahead and grab MySQL Python, which just connects the database with Python. So we'll use pip for that. So you can do pip install MySQL Python. So now we want to go ahead and just set up a database. So let's just go ahead and do MySQL server start. Okay, so there's no space in that command. So if I do MySQL server start, starting MySQL, actually looks like MySQL's already going, so let me stop it. So I had the server already going. I left it on by accident. So if you do start, anyway, to set up a user, you just type in MySQL -u for username. You just use the username root, and then -p for password. And you can go ahead and enter your password. And looks like I entered the wrong password. Oh, I didn't even use a password, that's why. So the first time you set this up, you'll have to set up a password. So next, let's go ahead and create a database. So I'm going to do create database Django -db _db. I believe this is already set up. Yeah, the database already exists. Go ahead and create the same database. And when you create a database, let me just change this. That's the output that you're going to get when it's correct. And then to exit out of the MySQL shell that we're in here, just type quit. Okay, so next we want to install virtualenv, which stands for virtual environment. And virtualenv is really important. It's used to create self-contained development environments. And you can really think of it as it's just a development environment that is isolated from the rest of your computer, so that anything that you install in there is not going to affect anything outside that development environment. So to install virtualenv, again, you just use pip. So pip install virtualenv. And so now let's just go ahead and set up our basic development structure. So I'm just going to set this up in my documents. I'm going to do make directory, new project. I'm going to go ahead and navigate into that new project. CD just stands for change directory. And then I'm going to set up a new virtual environment within that directory. So you can see within the virtual environment directory that created, we have 3 other directories. Bin include libraries, and lib, lib is for libraries. Include is where Python 2.7 is. And then your bin is where easy install and pip is, and that's where also the activation command is. So let's go ahead and activate it. So let me back out to the main directory here. Clear the screen. So to activate it, if you're in Unix, you just type source env /bin/activate. And you can tell when you're in virtualenv or when it's activated, because you can see the name of the virtual environment directory there. And then to deactivate, you just type in deactivate, and now we're out. And then to reactivate, you can do the exact same thing, and it's activated. And I also have a video set up here. This is geared towards Windows environments because it's just a little bit more tricky to install. But if you need help, you can always watch this video. Okay, so now that we're in the virtual environment and it is activated, anything that we install there is not going to affect anything else outside of that environment. So let's go ahead and install Django, and we're going to be using version 1.5 for this tutorial, which is the latest version. And this will take, I don't know, probably 2 minutes to install. Okay, so now that it's installed, let's go ahead and set up a new Django project. So we'll just do Django Admin.py start project. We'll just do my site. Oops, forgot the dash. And you can see it created that new project there, so we can go ahead and CD into the new project. And you can see that these are the basic files in there. Check that out on a Unix environment. You'll have to install tree, and that's what we have in there. So now let's go ahead and actually get this project set up in Sublime. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Sublime. I'm going to open up a new window. I'm going to go up to Project, Add Folder to Project. Then it's under Documents, New Project, My Site. Go ahead and open that up. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Save project as, and I'm going to go ahead and save that under Documents, New Project, and I'll just save that as Django_demo. Let's go ahead and bring this down a little bit so you can see. And you can see that, and you can see the various folders and files that are in this project right now. Okay, so let's go back to Firefox here. So next we want to put the project under version control, and again we use Git for that. But first we want to add a new file called .gitignore, and that's used to ignore files that we don't want added to the Git repository. And traditionally, you do not want to add your virtual environment files to the repository. So I'm just going to say touch.gitignore, And touch just creates a new file called gitignore. I'm going to go back up Sublime, and then just close that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these file names directly in here. Go ahead and save that. Okay, so now I'm going to put under version control. So git init, that command will initialize a new repository within that directory. Git add period, you can say period or star, and that's going to add all the files within that directory tree. And then we want to commit the repository. So say git commit, and I'll just say initial. And so that added all the new files to the master repository. So if you use GitHub or Bitbucket to manage your repositories, now is a good time to go ahead and push your files there. Okay, so next, I believe we want to go ahead and set up a database. Yeah, so let's go ahead and open up settings.py. So we're going to be using MySQL. The name of the database we set up was Django_DB. Username was root, and then you want to put your password here, and I actually didn't use a password, so I am fine. And so now we want to go ahead and sync the database. So that will create the tables. No module name MySQL DB. Okay, so that's because I installed MySQL DB outside the virtual environment. So let's go ahead and install that again. So pip install Python, I think it was MySQL DB. No, what was it? Oh, MySQL Python. Okay, so now if we sync the tables, it should be fine. Okay, so I already have this database set up for Django, so let me actually change this and keep yours as this _DB, but I just want to show you what happens when you install or when you sync the database to a new database. So let's go ahead and do that again. So you see it's creating all those default tables. Now you want to set up a super user, and the super user will have access to the Django Admin. So go ahead and say yes. I just use admin, email address, I'll just do michael@realpython.com. Password, I'm just going to use admin again. Okay. Now we can launch the production, or actually that should say development server. And that port is already in use, so you're not going to get that error. I'm just going to use a different port. And you can then point your browser to localhost 800 or 8000, and you should see, if everything works correctly, you're going to see this generic "it worked, congratulations, blah blah blah" page that is standard with Django. Alright, cool. Okay, so next we want to install South. Now, South is used for managing any changes that you make to your database tables. And so after you set up your schema for your first table and then sync the database, in other words, create the database table, then it's difficult to make any sort of changes to your database. That's where South comes into play. So let's go ahead and get that installed. So then you can hit Control C to exit out of the development server or kill the development server. So let's do pip install South. Okay, so that's all of the different packages and libraries that we need to install. So now what we want to do is we want to do pip freeze. And what pip freeze does is it basically records all of the libraries and packages that we have installed, as well as the version numbers. So that way if you need to recreate your project on a different machine, or if somebody else wants to recreate the project, they can easily install the libraries and dependencies that are needed based on the requirements.txt file, which will be created when you run pip freeze. So we'll do pip freeze requirements.txt. So there's the dependencies that we have: Django, MySQL, Python, South, and then WSGI, and that's actually used for deployment on a server, WSGI or WSGI. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set up the Django app. So we have the project set up, and basically the difference between an app and a project is an application is everything that goes into your website. So let's say your website is the project. An app should separate all the different functionalities out. So one application could be a blog, another application could manage user authentication. You can think of it, a good metaphor is the difference between classes and functions. So within a class you have various functions, and each function should do something different, which is the exact same thing that an app should do. So let's go ahead and create a new app. So do Python manage.py start app, and you can name this anything you want. Let's just do my app. Okay, so now let's take a look at the structure now. So we'll do tree-l3. Okay, so now let's go ahead and update the installed apps. So we'll open up Django, settings.py, and we installed, or we want to add the application that we just created, so my app. We also want to put in South. I believe that's it for now. Yeah, my app and South. Oh, and then I also want to, you also want to enable the admin panel. So we can just uncomment that right here. I'll go ahead and save that. So now we want to open up urls.py and uncomment these three lines here. urls.py is under the project, and we want to uncomment this one, and these are for, again, for your admin panel. Let's go ahead and uncomment this one here. So I'll go ahead and save that. We want to sync the database again. And so now that we have South installed, it wants us to use migrations. So let's go ahead and set up our initial migration. And then let's go ahead and apply any database changes that we made. We haven't made any changes, but just want to show you how to do this. So what that did was it created a migration file here. And when we did migration up or migration forwards, it would have added in any new updates to the schema. And then you can always do migration down or backwards to reverse those changes if you made any sort of mistakes or anything like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and fire up the server again. And let's just go ahead and make sure that we can get to the admin panel. And then go ahead and enter your username and password that you used for your super user. Alright, cool. So we're all set up here. These are our database tables that we have. Let me just close out of these here. So since we've made a bunch of changes, let's go ahead and commit to Git. So do Control or Command C to kill the server. So I'm going to do Git add, and then we'll do Git commit -m. -m is for message, and then you just kind of want to put in there what we did, and this is everything you did. Updated settings, created app, added south, enabled Django Admin. So I will just copy this out of here, save time. And 16 files changed, and this added these changes or these new files to the repository. So this next part here is about creating branches of your repository. And so you want to create a branch every time you do any major development. This is actually a pretty advanced stuff here. And if you're just creating your Django project for the first time, you don't really need to mess around with this. So we're going to go ahead and skip this. And so let's look at a basic workflow here. So we have everything set up. We set up our project. We got the development set up, development environment set up. We have a text editor, all the repositories. So the basic workflow that you want to use is, first you want to navigate to your project, activate your virtual environment, do any development, commit your changes to version control. Then you can deploy, or in other words, ship it to your production environment, and then you can deactivate virtualenv. And that's just the basic workflow. The more advanced workflow is mainly for if you're creating different branches on your development machine. So we're going to follow the basic workflow. So we've already navigated to the project directory. Virtual environment is activated. So let's go ahead and do some development. So we're going to create an app, and this is just going to be very basic. It's going to be a single page app that uses Markdown to display text. And if you're not familiar with Markdown, you can read about it at this URL. Markdown is just a very easy way to write markup. And markup is just basic HTML. So I'm going to pause the video for a second, grab a drink of water, and I also need to grab my power cord. So you won't know it, but I will be right back.